Welcome to the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Friday, July 10th. This is Gina Palma. Looking at the upcoming weather for the next week, we will have a few lingering thunderstorms still today in parts of the eastern Great Basin. Otherwise, hotter and drier conditions this weekend with near record heat, especially over the eastern half of the region, and continued breezy winds in many locations. Otherwise, showers and thunderstorms will start returning, possibly late in the weekend or early next week, coming up from the south for our first taste of monsoon moisture. Otherwise, we still have our Great Basin Fuel and Fire Behavior Advisory in effect, and fuels are rapidly drying over the next few days. Looking at the potential impacts over the next 3 days, again, hot and dry and very hot and dry this weekend, breezy winds in the south and in western areas today, and then winds will still be breezy in some of those same locations, but also increase over central and eastern Idaho into Wyoming Saturday, and then continue on Sunday. Otherwise, the very hot temperatures this weekend, again, will be the main story before the moisture returns for showers and thunderstorms. There are extreme heat warnings in effect and heat advisories across the Great Basin. So again, very hot temperatures, especially something to keep in mind for those working outside, and a few red flag warnings for some of these gusty winds. Looking at the precipitation and lightning over the last 24 hours, just some isolated to scattered thunderstorms from southern Idaho into northeast Nevada and then over into northern Utah and up into Idaho. Did have very scattered light amounts of precipitation, and a few fires have popped up. Otherwise, over the last 7 days, we've seen above normal precipitation only in spots associated with thunderstorm activity, otherwise very dry conditions, especially across the southern half of the region and into parts of Idaho. Yesterday, we had 21 fires across the Great Basin reported for over 770 acres and over 2,600 acres of growth on our large fires. We are still at PL4, both at Great Basin and at Nick, and you can see all of our large and team fires across the Great Basin along with new initial attack. The morning satellite image shows generally clear skies in mostly all locations with the exception of just some clouds over northern Utah, which is where we could see some isolated thunderstorms today. Also, you can see the Babylon fire still active, so smoke impacts for southeast Utah. And looking at those smoke impacts today, we'll generally see westerly winds, so that will push the smoke off to the east. However, tomorrow winds really lighten up over southern Utah, so any fire activity, we do see the smoke will likely fan out more in other directions that haven't been seeing some of the smoke recently. Looking at our current fire danger conditions across the Great Basin, looking at some of our smoke impacts for today, we have some fires in eastern Oregon, so some of that smoke will push into central Idaho today. And then the Babylon is still active this morning, so producing smoke, and with those westerly winds, will push that smoke off to the east. Tomorrow, winds really lighten up over southern areas, so that smoke will likely fan out more in all directions in areas that haven't been seeing some of the smoke recently with those westerly winds. Looking at our current fire danger conditions, we do have ERCs above the 90th or 97th percentile across much of Utah and the southern 2/3 of Nevada, and then areas over western and northern areas of the basin have been increasing rapidly, with most areas above the 80th percentile. Still, the salmon chalice is a little bit lower, but that will likely increase rapidly by tomorrow. Otherwise, looking at our trends, we will continue to see those ERCs rapidly rise the next few days with the heat and dryness in all areas across the Great Basin. And then as we see that moisture returning by either Sunday or Monday next week, we will see those ERCs drop in many areas, especially across the southern half of the region. However, prior to those thunderstorms arriving, many areas will actually hit historic maximums for ERC, so something to pay attention to with the increase in lightning. Looking at the weather pattern, we have high pressure stretching from west to east across southern areas today, and that will build north and east, giving us our heat dome across much of the Great Basin for the weekend. Otherwise, low pressure near the northwest coast will try to move eastward, and that will give us our uptick in winds the next couple of days in the north and west. However, that ridge really will dominate Sunday, Monday. Looking at our high risk, we are high risking areas where those winds will be gusty in the very dry conditions. So in southern areas and western areas today and up into southwest Idaho, and then generally across the north on Saturday and Sunday. And looking at the details, you can see those gusty winds the next few days. Most of those gusts generally will be in the 30 to 35 mile per hour range, but can't rule out some isolated gusts in the upper 30s. And then by Sunday, most areas winds start to drop off a bit, but they will be fairly strong in parts of the Salmon Chalice over into eastern Idaho and western Wyoming. And looking at the relative humidity with these very hot and dry conditions, relative humidity drops into the low single digits across much of Nevada, Utah, and the Arizona Strip, even seeing those single digits further north. Precipitation, really not much to speak of aside from the isolated thunderstorms the next few days. We will have to watch Sunday. Models are still not showing much consistency with how quickly the moisture pushes north, so we may see some thunderstorms by Sunday, but more likely Monday. Temperatures, again, peaking this weekend, with many areas that'll be near that record heat will be over the eastern half of the region, where we'll see temperatures in Utah and Idaho over 100 degrees and even over 105 by Sunday. Looking at Monday through Wednesday, that low remains off the west coast, giving us our increase in southerly winds, pushing that moisture north as that high is pushed off to the east. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll continue to see moisture across the Great Basin, and we have indicated that with our high risk for thunderstorms on Monday in the south and west, and gradually pushing that threat north and east. And depending on the amount of moisture, we will see fuels moderate across the Great Basin. The degree to which it moderates will again depend on that rainfall, even though we will definitely see an increase in humidity. Looking at the details, not really much to speak of for wind. Most of the concern will be in the thunderstorm activity, and then you can see with the relative humidities, with that moisture moving north, relative humidities really come up across the region, possibly Monday staying in the single digits or teens and off to the east, but again, we will see that improvement going through midweek. Looking at the precipitation field, we are looking for that return of showers and thunderstorms. I will say still some question marks in the details of exactly where these thunderstorms will develop and how much rainfall they'll have. So definitely keep an eye on that with both the return of lightning initially for increased fire potential, and then also with where the heavy rain set up with concerns about flash flooding, especially in some of our burn areas. Temperatures will generally moderate as we go through the middle of next week. Quick recap of our 7-day. You can see the high risk for winds here the next few days, and then we transition that with a high risk for lightning going from Monday through Wednesday next week. But again, we will keep an eye on Sunday to see if we see any lightning that may trigger a high risk earlier than expected. And then the fire potential does moderate, at least temporarily. The 6 to 10-day outlook from July 15th through the 19th still shows the very warm temperatures and that moisture surge. This will definitely not be a one and done. We will have other opportunities later in July for secondary rounds of monsoon moisture. That concludes our webcast for today. Check back tomorrow for the latest updates.